It began with a sound that did not belong to the sky. Not the steady rhythm of rain, nor the whisper of wind, but a sharp crack, like the sky itself had split open. In the wide fields beyond the whispering pines, where golden grasses danced in the breath of the storm, something moved faster than the eye could follow. A blur, a boy. Feet barely touching the earth. Heart pounding like the hooves of wild horses. Arms slicing the air in a rhythm of urgency. The thunder rolled behind him, not in the slow, rumbling voice of weather, but in furious claps that chased him like a beast. It leapt from cloud to cloud, snapping trees and swallowing sound. Yet the boy ran. His name was Kellen, though the wind had already torn his name away. All around, the sky darkened like spilled ink, painting the world in shades of ash and silver. Trees bent in fear, birds vanished mid-flight, and the air itself seemed to hold its breath. Lightning cracked through the clouds, tracing jagged scars that burned hot and white, yet Kellen kept running. His eyes were wide, not with panic, but purpose. He carried something small and glowing, tucked close against his chest, wrapped in cloth that shimmered faintly even through the storm. Each time thunder struck behind him, the glow pulsed stronger, as if drawn to the storm or defying it. The hills ahead looked impossibly far. The sky behind looked impossibly near. Still he ran, with mud splashing high and wind screaming at his back. For Kellen was not running from the storm. Kellen had always been fast. In the quiet village of Thistlebend, he was known for it. Faster than the dogs, faster than the river's current, when it spilled over the rocks after spring rains. But no one ever imagined he could be faster than thunder. Before the storm, before the sky's fury, life had moved gently. Thistlebend was a sleepy place nestled between two ridges, where children played in meadows and old folks told stories by the fire. Kellen's days were filled with running games and helping his mother carry baskets of herbs from the forest. But Kellen wasn't like the others. He had a feeling inside, restless, flickering, like a spark waiting to catch flame. He often climbed to the tallest hill just to feel the wind rush past, pretending he was made of wind himself. One morning, as the mist still clung low to the fields, Kellen followed the sound of singing not from a voice, but from something softer, clearer, like glass chiming beneath water. The sound came from the heart of the woods, where children were warned not to stray. But Kellen's feet did not listen to warnings. They followed the melody. He found it there, in a clearing shaped like a circle, hidden beneath a canopy of silver-leaved trees. Resting atop a stone pedestal was a sphere no larger than an apple. It pulsed gently with a soft blue light. The air around it shimmered, not with heat, but magic. Kellen stepped forward, and the moment his fingers brushed the sphere, the sound stopped. The world held its breath, and the sky changed. From that day forward, the weather grew strange. The clouds began to move in odd patterns, gathering quickly over places they once passed by. Thunder cracked even on sunny mornings. Sometimes, a streak of lightning would strike without warning, close, too close, then vanish. The villagers whispered. Some said the sky had been angered. Others believed an old spirit had awoken. Kellen told no one of the sphere. He kept it hidden beneath the floorboards in his room, though it seemed to hum louder with each passing day. He didn't know what it was, but he could feel it watching the sky, almost like it was waiting. Then came the day the sky broke. It began just after noon, when a stillness swept through the fields. Birds stopped singing. The wind curled back into itself. Then, from above the ridge, clouds poured in black, thick and fast. Thunder followed immediately, not with a slow rumble, but a teeth-rattling crack. The villagers scrambled for shelter. Windows slammed shut, doors bolted, even the animals cowered in their stalls. Kellen stood in the center of the village square, eyes fixed on the sky. The sphere, which he had tucked under his shirt after feeling its pulse quicken, now burned against his chest. Something inside him knew this storm had come for the sphere. For him. From the clouds, a voice echoed not in words, but in feeling, a roar of anger, of betrayal. The sky had rules. Magic had rules. And Kellen had broken them. He ran, out of the village, Across the fields, through the wind and rain, thunder lashed behind him, striking trees and lighting up the sky like fire. But no matter how fast the storm moved, Kellen's legs carried him faster. For each boom behind him, he pushed harder. He didn't know where he was going, only that he must outrun the thunder. As he ran, memories flashed between each heartbeat. The first time he had heard the chime, the way the sphere had whispered without words, the feeling of being chosen, though he didn't know for what. Now, as the world blurred around him, he felt the pieces connect. The sphere was a heartstone, an ancient artifact from the time before stories. It held the breath of storms, the memory of the wind, the voice of thunder. And it had been hidden, locked away, until a boy with quick feet and a curious heart had awoken it. But why had it chosen him? Through the downpour and roar, Kellen reached the edge of the whispering pines. The trees bent low as he passed, their branches groaning. The storm chased him still, closer than ever. Each step felt heavier now, as if the very air had thickened. The sphere pulsed rapidly, its light cutting through the gray. Then he saw her, an old woman, standing at the edge of the path, hair like frost, eyes like dusk. She raised one hand, not to stop him, but to guide him. Without speaking, she turned and began walking into the forest. Kellen followed, his breath catching, not from running, but from the weight of what was coming. They reached a clearing deep in the woods, where the rain did not fall. The storm circled above, but here, the air was still. The woman pointed to a stone circle set into the ground, ancient and worn. At its center was a hollow, just the right size for the sphere. Kellen stepped forward, heart thundering louder than the sky. But something held him back. The sphere pulsed, not with fear, but with a question. It asked not to be returned. Not yet. It had awakened for a reason. The storm wasn't just angry. It was searching for balance. Kellen understood then. The storm had grown wild because its heart had been hidden too long. Locked away, it had become restless, angry, like a child left alone in the dark. And the sphere this heartstone had chosen Kellen not just to run, but to heal. He turned from the stone circle. The woman didn't stop him. She only nodded, as if she had seen this choice in the wind long ago. Kellen ran again, back toward the storm. This time, not to escape it, but to meet it. As the storm softened, Kellen stood once more at the crest of the ridge, soaked to the bone, hair clinging to his forehead, heart still hammering in his chest. But he wasn't tired anymore. He felt something else stirring within him, an unfamiliar steadiness, like roots growing beneath his feet. The wind no longer howled to push him down. Instead, it circled gently around him, as if recognizing him, as if greeting an old friend. The sky above was no longer wild. Instead, the clouds swirled gently, as if unsure how to move now that their fury had passed. Faint echoes of thunder rolled in the far distance, low and slow, like the fading beats of a giant heart. Kellen looked up at them, not with fear, but with quiet understanding. He didn't need the heartstone to tell him what the storm had meant. He felt it now, deep inside, as if the wind had left behind part of its memory in him. The old woman still stood silently nearby. Though her hand now held the orb, she seemed to watch Kellen more than the sky. In her eyes, he saw neither pride nor judgment, only a calm knowing, like someone who had seen this path walked many times before. Her cloak rippled around her like water, catching the gentle breeze that carried the scent of wet pine and soft moss. She did not speak. She did not need to. A gust of wind curled around them, lifting Kellen's damp sleeves and carrying with it a single leaf, bright green and trembling. The leaf danced in the air, swaying between them, and then lifted higher upward toward the clearing sky. Kellen followed it with his gaze until it vanished into the light. For a long moment, all was quiet. The storm had left behind a silence that was not empty, but full of meaning, full of breath, full of the stillness that comes only after a great storm has spoken its truth. Then, from deep within the clouds above, something flickered. Not lightning this time, but a soft light, pale gold, shimmering at the edges of the sky. A final goodbye from the storm. A sign that it had heard him too. Kellen slowly lowered his arms. The orb in the woman's hands dimmed, until it was no more than a faint glow, like the last ember of a dying fire. But Kellen could still feel it, its presence, its memory, nestled in his chest beside his heartbeat. The wind was speaking again, but now it spoke not in roars or howls, but in small things, in leaves and sighs and raindrops falling slow. The woman stepped forward and gently touched Kellen's forehead with her fingers. Where she touched, warmth spread, like the memory of sunlight. Not hot or burning, but steady, like something that had always been there and had simply needed to be remembered. Then she turned without a word and walked back toward the forest, the heartstone cradled in her arms like a sleeping child. Kellen remained still, watching her disappear among the trees. Each step she took seemed to fold into the woods, like a page turning back in an old book. And though she said nothing, Kellen knew what she had left him with. Not power, not magic, but understanding. And though the wind had quieted, the air now held something new. A promise. When he finally descended the ridge, the world below felt different. Not just washed clean by rain, but changed. Birds were returning to their branches, animals peeked from their burrows. The distant river, swollen and frothing from the storm, now sparkled in the emerging sun. And in the fields near Thistlebend, villagers stepped cautiously from their homes, blinking in the golden light, their faces filled with questions they didn't yet know how to ask. They spotted him from afar, mud-caked, soaked, and alone. But he didn't feel alone. Not anymore. As he walked, people gathered, whispering his name. Some stared at the fading storm. Others looked at Kellen with wide eyes, searching his face for answers. But he said nothing. He didn't know how to put into words what had happened high on that ridge. How could he explain the way the sky had screamed and then sighed? How could he speak of the moment he had faced the thunder and felt no fear? And maybe he didn't need to. Because sometimes, the most powerful stories are not told. They are carried. As he passed, the children followed him with wide-eyed wonder. Some pointed to the sky, others reached for his hand. But Kellen simply walked, slow and steady, each step echoing in the silence like a drumbeat. In the village square, the elder, a man with a beard, like drifting clouds, and eyes sharp as crows, stepped forward. He looked at Kellen for a long time. Then, without a word, he bowed his head. Not in fear, not in thanks, but in respect. And though Kellen did not bow in return, he gave a small nod, the kind that said, "I understand, we are part of something bigger, and it moves through us, even when we do not see it." The villagers gathered around him now, forming a quiet circle. Children leaned forward. Mothers clutched shawls tighter. Fathers stood with arms crossed, not in defiance, but in awe. But Kellen didn't speak. He simply turned his gaze to the sky. The storm had passed, but the wind still carried its story. It would travel through the trees, over the hills, down to the rivers, across the valleys. And someday, someone else would hear it. Someone else would run. Back in his home, where the hearth crackled and dried his clothes, Kellen lay still that night, eyes open, listening to the breeze tapping gently on the window. It no longer frightened him. It no longer felt strange. It felt familiar, like something returning home. He closed his eyes and let the wind carry him, not away from danger, but toward the part of himself he had discovered in the heart of the storm. He was no longer just the boy who ran fast. He was the boy who had listened, who had stood, who had outrun thunder not to escape it, but to understand it. And somewhere, far beyond the village, deep in the forest where the leaves shimmered silver in the moonlight, the heartstone rested quietly in its keeper's arms, glowing with the faintest light. Not as a warning, not as a weapon, but as a memory of a boy, of a storm, of a moment when courage did not roar. It ran, and then it stood still. Morning came with a hush, as if the sky itself had chosen to sleep a little longer. A soft mist rose from the grass, curling around the rooftops of Thistlebend, and dew clung like tiny diamonds to every leaf and petal. Birds sang again, not in a hurry, but in slow, careful notes, as if reminding the world how to breathe after holding it in for so long. Kellen woke to the sound of it all, not just the birds, but the quiet between them, the the peaceful breath of the earth. His body still ached from the run, his legs heavy beneath the blankets, but his heart felt light. The storm was gone, truly gone, not just from the sky but from within. Outside, the village was stirring. Neighbors swept water from doorways, children picked up fallen branches, and somewhere down by the stream, laughter returned for the first time in days. Yet, everyone seemed to move a little slower, a little softer, as if the memory of the thunder still echoed in their thoughts. Callan stepped outside into the cool air, blinking in the gentle sunlight. The world smelled of wet earth and pine and something else, hope. He walked the edge of the village, his feet remembering the rhythm of the path even as his mind wandered. People waved quietly. Some smiled. Others just watched. No one asked him for the whole story. Somehow, they seemed to know it wasn't something to be told with words. It was something to be held, shared in silence, like sitting beside a fire on a cold night. At the edge of the fields, where the grasses shimmered with morning dew, Callan found a patch of earth that had been scorched by lightning, just a blackened circle surrounded by green. He stepped into the center of it and looked up. Above him, the sky was blue. Soft, endless, and calm. He knelt there for a long time, placing his palm gently to the ground. He remembered the fury, the chase, the heat of the bolt when it struck the heartstone. But now, all he felt was stillness. The storm had passed, and it had left behind not damage, but truth. He stood and turned back toward the village. And there, in the distance, he saw her. The old woman. She stood at the forest's edge, just visible between the trunks, her cloak like a ripple in the morning air. She raised one hand, just slightly. Not a summons, not a farewell, just a gesture of knowing. Then she turned and vanished once more into the trees. Callan did not follow. He didn't need to. He understood now that she would appear only when the world tilted, when something old stirred and needed to be heard, like the wind, like the storm, like the truth that lives deep beneath the silence. In the days that followed, life returned to Thistlebend. Roofs were mended, gardens replanted. The elders began to retell old stories. But now they included a new one, of a boy who ran faster than thunder and came back with the sky in his eyes. They didn't know all the details, and they didn't need to. The story grew not from facts, but from feeling. And children whispered it to each other in the fields, pretending to outrun thunder themselves, laughing as they raced through the wind. But Callan never bragged. He never claimed more than what was felt. He simply watched the clouds when they passed, listened to the wind when it spoke, and smiled gently whenever thunder rolled far away, soft and slow, like a song with no words. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the hills in orange and gold, Callan sat by the stream. The water chuckled over stones and caught the light like melted coins. He leaned back, eyes half closed, listening, not for danger, not for warnings, but for balance. Behind him, the wind stirred the grass. A younger child, barely tall enough to reach his shoulder, sat down beside him. She said nothing, just kicked her feet in the stream, watching the ripples stretch and fade. After a moment, she looked at him and asked the question others hadn't dared to speak. Was it scary? Callan thought for a long time. Then he nodded. Yes, it was, but not in the way people think. The scariest part wasn't the lightning or the thunder. It was choosing not to run. It was choosing to stop. The little girl nodded like she understood. Maybe she didn't. Maybe she would one day. But she sat beside him longer than most would have, and in that silence, they both felt the quiet strength of what had been. Callan stayed there until the stars came out, blinking softly in the deep sky. And when he walked home, the night breeze wrapped around him like a gentle arm, and the moon watched from above with a silver eye. He knew he would run again. Not to flee, not to chase, but to feel the wind, to know its rhythm, to remember that it had once tried to outrun him and failed. Because even thunder must yield to those who listen, and even storms can be stilled by a single steady heart. Callan was no longer just a boy. He was a keeper of calm, a runner of truths. And though no statue would be built, no songs sung in his name, the wind would remember. The sky would remember, And deep in the forest, where the trees whisper secrets only the wind can hear, the heartstone would glow gently in its slumber, waiting for the day it would need to speak again. But not today. Today, the world was still, and the boy who outran thunder simply walked quiet, steady, free, beneath a sky that had once chased him and now called him friend,